Hello ladies and gentlemen, Xantora here and welcome back to another video. Now in today's video I'm going to be discussing an A380 potential rework for the future of an infinite flight. Now we're going to get some stuff clear before we even go into any details. Infinite Flight have not confirmed a rework, they have not mentioned a rework, and it's not going to happen in the upcoming update as far as we are aware. We know in the upcoming update it's an E170 rework, I believe, in the 22.2 or 3 update. I'm not sure what it is, I've forgotten. But yeah, in today's video we'll be discussing hopefully a future, very soon, potential rework of the Airbus A380 within Infinite Flight. Now I'm sure the first thing most of you notice within this video is that the aircraft, it just looks very dated in comparison to all of the other aircraft we see in Infinite Flight. You can see that the detail with, so here we've got the Emirates A380, you can see the detail within the word Emirates for a start, it's just not as clear or well detailed as on the more modern aircraft such as the A330 or the A220 with an Infinite Flight, which are much more reworked. Now here you can see on the tail of the aircraft, yet again, it just looks a bit old and pixely. I think it's blocky, you know, the paint is just not as smooth as it could be. Now I do need to remember this aircraft came out a very long time in Infinite Flight, so we're talking about 2012, 2013, around that era. I can actually get out the date right now for us all, the actual date. So it came out, the Airbus A380, in December 2012, so pretty much early 2013 around then, which is a very long time ago. Not far off, about 10 years now, nearly 10 years, about 9.5 I think. But you can see that the aircraft itself just looks old and very battered. Now here we've got one of the engines. Now when you compare it to more of the most modern engines, you can tell the more modern engines, the most newest reworked engines, the bays are clear and everything, but here it's more of a big blur. You can see sort of distinct blades, and then now as the engine starts to rev up, you've got the little spiral, which is in most engines of course. Again, a bit more blurry than you'd normally expect, but here when the aircraft or the aircraft's engine begins to get faster and faster as it becomes more warm and more ready, it spirals a bit more out of control and it looks a bit wild, as if there's like a loose screw somewhere within the engine and it looks like it's about to fly off. Now this is common with some engines do look like that. I don't think the A380 ones are meant to look like it, so as you can see now it looks like it's spiraling a bit out of control, but all in all I don't think the engines are that bad, other than they need a bit more detail paid to them. So I think that's an important factor to have into account when we do discuss potential A380 reworks. So hopefully now we can move on to another bit of the aircraft, and we're just going to look around the aircraft for it, so you can still see the tail, and I think the actual fuselage of the aircraft is quite cool. But I think if they were to rework the A380, so when we pay a bit closer attention to the windows that you could just seen on the side, the more recently reworked aircraft or newer aircraft, they have proper windows and they do look a lot more proper. Now when we go inside of the aircraft, that's right, it's the traditional see-through aircraft. Now you can see the cockpit in the distance, of course, which is something which needs a lot of detail paid to it within a rework. You'll be able to see that in a minute. So there's not even a door on the cockpit this side, so it is literally just an empty void. So here we can see the inside of the cockpit. There are very hardly any 3D objects within the cockpit which are there. So we've got, of course, the throttle, which you can see that's the gear up stick, the side stick. So all of these are in 3D. I think that's the brakes, I believe, and the flaps just behind the joystick, which are also 3D. But everything else within this cockpit, other than, of course, the seats, are pretty much 2D. So the way I think of it is it's just a sticker inside of the cockpit. So within an A380 rework, we would see a whole cockpit rework. The cockpit would of course get larger. You'd see the buttons on the side, or the clothing rack on the side, hopefully. Even there's not even a door in this cockpit. It's like just a little enclosed chamber, really. So the cockpit and all does need a rework. Now moving back onto the outside of the aircraft, so we're going to start to see it move as I now begin to taxi it. So I am taking the aircraft on a little flight around the airport, so I can also show you guys what it looks like within the air. Now, dip into the takeoff bit of this aircraft, so I'm just going to take it up in the air and show you guys how nice it is to move. Now, I did only have about 2 hours of fuel, and I wasn't too sure on the weight, I can't remember that, but the aircraft was quite light in comparison, so of course it won't need as much runway to take off as you would expect. So we're going to start moving the aircraft down the runway, and it does accelerate much quicker than you would expect. I didn't have it at full throttle, I think I had it at 75% throttle through takeoff. No idea if that's realistic or not, you guys can let me know. And the aircraft does move very quickly, and I remember I didn't start from a full stop start. I was at taxiing at about 20 knots ground speed, so I had that before I even hit the acceleration, and the aircraft accelerates very quick down the short runway at Manchester Airport. Now it was a bit hard to find centerline, but of course you can see the aircraft does take off very quickly and very smoothly. And unfortunately the gear transition got slightly blocked off by the wing. I don't know what I was thinking there, but I just didn't catch it very well. But the gear does go up. I think it goes up a bit quicker than you would actually expect compared to real life, but I think the transition in itself is definitely something that does not need reworked as much detail as such as the interior or the cockpit. Now I think the interior of the aircraft, so you can see on the outside there are 2 floors in the A380, which is why it's such a cool aircraft. And having 2 floors is something which I think would be hard, because whether in-flight flight they go for a traditional like Emirates, because they have lots of big fancy stairs inside their A380s, I think, whereas other airlines do not. So I think during in-flight flight they do very basic cabins. So I think it will be just the fact of a very basic cabin. Hopefully they put some stairs inside the cabin somewhere so we can explore the cabin a bit. But there's also no cargo hold, no cargo door, no animated doors, and all of these need to be added to the A380 if we are to see it in a future rework. I think one of the things that would upset me the most is, so with the 737 they only did a cockpit rework, and I feel like if we do see an A380 rework, I personally would love to see the whole thing reworked. Now of course this is a big task which will take many months for the Infinite Flight developer team, but of course the developer team is massive and they do work on stuff in secret, so who knows what they could be doing right now. They could potentially be doing this in secret, or the A340, or another aircraft that we know. Now I'm about to land this A380, and as you can see in just a couple of seconds, here we go, the gear are coming out, and I think it is a good thing to get a quick view of. So you can see the gear coming down slowly but not too fast. I think maybe it would be a bit slower in real life, but again I do not know, that's just what I'd expect. But the gear does come down a lot quite quick. So something else that I found within the aircraft, so I'm not too sure if you saw the flaps going down earlier on in the video, but I will definitely show you the flaps going up later in the video. They come down very quick, and this is something which will have to be slowed down again in a full A380 rework, because we all know it does not take 2 seconds from full flaps to go to 0. That is just very unrealistic. But the aircraft does fly, and I think that is something very important within an aircraft, of course. So of course you see the aircraft coming into land now. It looks very good, I think, airborne. The flaps, again, I think the flaps are something which will need a bit more attention paid to them. Again, the back of the engine, a full aircraft rework will definitely be required. And now, as we come into the final stages of the flight, we're just coming into land. I think it was quite hard to align centerline with such a big aircraft, but that's not even anything to do with the rework. It's just the fact that the A380 is such a massive aircraft, so it will take a bit more effort to align it perfectly. Now, something I did find is when landing the A380, I found it was a bit easier to have a smooth landing. So you'll see now, I don't think that was too rough of all the landings we've seen in the world. I think it was a pretty good landing actually, and to hold up that flare at the end, I think it was easy, maybe a little bit too easy to keep the nose pitched up for that little bit of extra time. And also see the reverse thrust coming out of the engines, again, I think it's good animation. I don't think it would need too much adjustment when you compare it to the other engines within the A380s. So I think that doesn't need as much work, just the fact that the engine separates. But I'd imagine if they do a full engine rework, that would be fully changed as well. I also personally think that the aircraft came to a full stop landing, or it slowed down very quickly. Not sure, I was looking at the ground there. And now just let's pay a bit of attention to those spoilers and flaps. Now this is something which, personally for me, I think is one of the things that ruins us. Look, there you go. Not even 2 seconds and they are back down to 0, and I think that's something very unrealistic. Maybe spoilers do come down that quick, but I'm pretty sure flaps don't go from full to 0 that quickly. If I'm wrong, I am completely stupid, but yes. Now, that is my video on why the A380 needs a full rework. what will hopefully happen in the full rework. No idea when it will come. It could be a year, it could be 10 years, who knows. But thank you again for watching this YouTube video, and I'll see you all in my next video. Good night.
Find your way.